What happens when one of the most famous women in the world sits down for what should be a friendly late-night chat, and within minutes, the whole thing explodes into chaos? It only took 37 seconds after a single question left the host's mouth. 37 seconds for the smile to fade, the mood to shift, and for everyone watching to realize this was not going to be a normal interview. This is the moment nobody saw coming. The moment that left the audience in stunned silence. The moment that ended with security being called and a guest being escorted off the stage. Let me take you through exactly what happened, word for word, moment by moment. The lights were bright. The band had just finished playing. Jimmy Kimmel walked out to his desk with his usual warm energy, waving to the crowd as they cheered. He was in a good mood. Why wouldn't he be? His show had been on a winning streak. And tonight, he had a big guest. Meghan Markle was backstage, getting ready to walk out. This was supposed to be a fun appearance. She had a new project to promote. The producers had gone over the questions beforehand. Everything seemed normal. Jimmy settled into his chair and looked at the camera with that familiar grin. All right, folks, you know our next guest. She's been a member of the royal family. She's been an actress. She's been in the headlines more times than I can count. Please welcome Meghan Markle. The audience erupted. The applause was loud and genuine. People stood up from their seats. The band played her onto the stage. Meghan walked out with a big smile, waving to the crowd. She was wearing an elegant cream-colored outfit. She looked every bit the polished public figure she had become known as. She hugged Jimmy, a quick professional embrace, and then took her seat on the guest couch. The applause died down. Jimmy leaned forward with his elbows on the desk, ready to begin. "It is so great to have you here," Jimmy said. "How are you doing?" "I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me," Meghan replied. Her voice was warm, practiced. "It's always such a pleasure to be here in Los Angeles." "Well, Los Angeles loves you back," Jimmy said. "Now, I have to ask, because everyone wants to know. You've got this new venture you're working on. Tell us about it." Meghan's eyes lit up. This was clearly what she wanted to talk about. "Yes. So I've been working on this incredible project. It's really about empowering women and giving them a platform to share their stories. I feel like in today's world, women's voices are so often silenced, and I wanted to create a space where that doesn't happen." Jimmy nodded along. "That sounds wonderful. And this is something you've been passionate about for a while, right?" "Absolutely. Even before I met Harry, even before everything changed in my life, I was always someone who believed in using my platform for good. I think when you have a voice, you have a responsibility to use it." The audience applauded politely. Everything was going smoothly. The conversation was flowing. Jimmy was being his usual charming self, and Meghan was giving her usual polished answers. But then Jimmy decided to ask a different kind of question. Nothing mean, nothing aggressive, just a simple, honest question that any interviewer might ask. "So, I'm curious," Jimmy said, leaning back in his chair slightly. "You talk a lot about wanting privacy, which I totally understand. But you also do a lot of interviews, you have the podcast, you have the Netflix deal. How do you balance wanting privacy with also being so public? Because I imagine that's a tricky line to walk." The room didn't notice it at first, but if you were watching closely, you would have seen it. A tiny flicker in Meghan's expression. Her smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It became tighter, more controlled. "Well," she said, and there was a slight edge to her voice that hadn't been there before. "I think there's a difference between choosing to share your story on your own terms and having your story told for you by people who don't know you." Jimmy nodded. "Sure, that makes sense. Because when we did the Netflix series, that was us taking control of our narrative. That was us saying, this is our truth, and we're going to tell it ourselves. That's very different from tabloids making up stories or palace sources spreading lies about you." Right, Jimmy said. He was still being agreeable, still being friendly. "I guess I'm just wondering, from a practical standpoint, how do you decide what to share and what to keep private? Because it seems like a lot of your life is out there now." This was the moment. This was the 37-second mark, and this was where everything started to go wrong. Meghan's posture shifted. She sat up straighter, almost defensively. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me, Jimmy." Her tone had changed completely. The warmth was gone. The practiced media friendliness had evaporated. In its place was something harder, something sharper. Jimmy, to his credit, didn't seem fazed. He's been doing this for decades. He's had difficult guests before. "I'm just asking how you make those decisions," he said calmly. Like what stays private and what becomes part of the public conversation. It's an interesting thing to think about. Are you suggesting that I'm being hypocritical? The audience went quiet. You could feel the energy in the room change. People were looking at each other, uncertain. Was this a joke? Was this part of some bit? It was not a joke. No, not at all, Jimmy said, holding up his hands in a peaceful gesture. I'm genuinely just curious. It's not a gotcha question, I promise. Because it sounds like a gotcha question, Meghan said. Her voice was getting louder now. It sounds like you're trying to paint me as some kind of hypocrite who complains about privacy while also being in the public eye. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed that you would go there. Jimmy blinked. He looked genuinely surprised. This was not the direction he had expected the conversation to go. Meghan, I assure you, that was not my intention at all. I'm sorry if it came across that way. Well, it did come across that way, she said. And frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people questioning my motives. I'm tired of people acting like I don't have a right to tell my own story, while also wanting certain parts of my life to remain private. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. The audience was completely silent now. Nobody was clapping. Nobody was laughing. Everyone was just watching, transfixed. As the interview derailed in real time, Jimmy took a breath. He was trying to steer things back to calmer waters. You're absolutely right, he said. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. I apologize if my question was clumsy. Let's move on to something else. But Meghan was not ready to move on. No, I think we need to address this, she said, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly the kind of treatment I've been subjected to for years. This constant scrutiny, this constant questioning of everything I do. It's exhausting. I understand, Jimmy said, and I really am sorry. Do you, though? Meghan asked. Do you understand what it's like to have every single thing you do picked apart and analyzed and criticized? Do you understand what it's like to have an entire institution working against you? Do you understand what it's like to be treated as an outsider in your own family? Jimmy was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. I can't say I understand all of that, he admitted. But I do know that you've been through a lot, and I have a lot of respect for how you've handled it. Then why ask me questions that feed into the same narrative that the tabloids push? Meghan demanded. Why give them ammunition? That wasn't my intention, Jimmy repeated. It was a genuine question about how public figures manage their public and private lives. I ask everyone some version of that question. I asked George Clooney the same thing last month. I'm not George Clooney, Meghan said sharply. I know you're not. I'm just saying it's a standard question. Well, maybe it shouldn't be a standard question. Maybe interviewers should think more carefully about the implications of the questions they ask. Because words have consequences, Jimmy. The way you frame something matters. At this point, the audience was starting to get uncomfortable. A few people shifted in their seats. The energy in the room was tense, charged with something that felt like it could explode at any moment. Jimmy tried one more time to diffuse the situation. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot here, and that's my fault. Can we start over? I really do want to hear about your project and all the great work, if you're doing. For a moment, it seemed like Meghan might accept the olive branch. Her expression softened slightly. She took a breath, but then Jimmy made a mistake. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but it was enough. He glanced at his producer off to the side, just for a second, with a look that seemed to say, "Can you believe this?" Meghan caught it. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" "What?" "No, You were just what?" "Checking with your producer about how to handle the difficult guest? Making sure you're getting good footage of me having a breakdown?" "Meghan, I promise you, I did not roll my eyes. I saw it, Jimmy. Don't gaslight me. I've had enough of people gaslighting me to last a lifetime." The word gaslight hung in the air. It was a heavy word, a loaded word, and Meghan had thrown it out with force. Jimmy's expression changed. For the first time, he looked genuinely hurt. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "I've never gaslighted anyone, and I would never do that to you." "Then what was that look?" "I was just checking how much time we had left in the segment. That's all. I do it every interview. My producer gives me time cues. It has nothing to do with you. Everything has to do with me when I'm the one sitting in this chair," Meghan said. "When I'm the one being questioned. When I'm the one being judged." There was a long pause. The silence was deafening. Nobody in that studio knew what to do or where to look. Finally, Jimmy spoke. His voice was calm, measured, professional. He had clearly decided to take the high road. Meghan, I am genuinely sorry that you feel attacked. That was never my intention. I have always had a lot of respect for you. All I wanted to do tonight was have a nice conversation and let you talk about your new project. That's it. For a moment, it seemed like things might calm down. Jimmy's words were sincere. His tone was gentle. He was giving her every opportunity to de-escalate. But instead of accepting his apology, Meghan went in a different direction entirely. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Jimmy raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Your problem is that you're part of the machine. You're part of the system that chews people up and spits them out. You sit here in your nice suit behind your nice desk, and you ask your nice questions, and you think you're one of the good guys, but you're not. You're just another cog in the wheel that destroys people. The audience gasped. This was not something anyone had expected to hear. Jimmy's jaw tightened. You could see that the words had landed hard, but he kept his composure. I'm sorry you see it that way, he said. I don't agree with your characterization, but I understand that you're upset. Of course you don't agree, Meghan said. People like you never do. You never see the harm you cause because you're too busy patting yourselves on the back for being progressive and enlightened. The rest of us. Who? The press. The media. The people who have made my life a living nightmare for the past several years. You're all the same. Jimmy shook his head slowly. Meghan, I have spent my entire career trying to be fair, trying to be kind, trying to give people a platform to share their stories. I'm not perfect, but I try. And I really don't think it's fair for you to lump me in with tabloid journalists and paparazzi. Fair? Meghan laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was bitter, harsh. You want to talk to me about fair? Nothing about my life has been fair since the day I met Harry. Nothing. I believe you, Jimmy said. I really do, and I'm sorry for that. Stop saying you're sorry. Your apologies are meaningless if you don't actually change your behavior. What behavior? I asked you a question. One question, and it was not an unfair question. It was not a hostile question. It was a question that anyone might ask anyone who lives a public life. But I'm not anyone, am I? Meghan said. I'm me, and I come with a history. I come with trauma. I come with years of being mistreated by people who were supposed to protect me. So when you ask me a question like that, you're not just asking a question, you're triggering years of pain. Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. I hear you, and I'm sorry that my question triggered those feelings, but I can't be held responsible for everything that's happened to you. I can only be responsible for my own actions and my own intentions, and my intentions were good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Meghan shot back. Maybe, Jimmy said, but it's also paved with people assuming the worst about others. And right now, you're assuming the worst about me, even though I've done nothing but try to be respectful and kind. This seemed to catch Meghan off guard. She had expected him to keep apologizing, to keep groveling. She had not expected him to push back. Are you saying I'm the problem here? I'm saying that maybe we've both contributed to this situation. I asked a question that upset you, and I'm sorry for that. But you've spent the last 10 minutes attacking my character and calling me part of some evil machine, and that's not fair either. Meghan's eyes narrowed. So, now you're the victim? I'm not claiming to be a victim. I'm just pointing out that this has been a two-way street. Unbelievable. Meghan shook her head and looked out at the audience. Do you see this? Do you see what's happening right now? This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly how they operate. They provoke you, and then when you react, they turn it around and make you the bad guy. The audience didn't react. They were frozen, caught between two forces that neither could control. Jimmy leaned forward. Meghan, I have not provoked you. I asked you a straightforward question, and you took offense to it. I apologized multiple times. I offered to move on. But you've chosen to escalate this, and now you're trying to turn the audience against me. And I'm not going to sit here and let that happen. Oh, now you're going to fight back? Now you're going to show your true colors? My true colors are exactly what you've seen for the past 20 years on television. I'm a guy who likes to laugh and have fun and talk to interesting people. That's it. I'm not out to get you. I'm not part of some conspiracy. I'm just a late-night host who wanted to have a nice conversation. Meghan stood up. The movement was sudden, unexpected. Everyone in the studio tensed. Jimmy's eyes widened. You know what? I don't have to sit here and take this. Meghan, please. Let's just... No, I'm done. I'm done being disrespected. I'm done being questioned. I'm done with all of it. She was standing in front of the couch now, her hands on her hips, her eyes blazing. Jimmy stood up too, more slowly, his hands raised in a calming gesture. No one is disrespecting you. Please, let's just sit back down and finish the interview. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I don't want to talk about anything anymore. Not with you. Okay, Jimmy said. That's your choice. But can we at least end this civilly? For the audience's sake? The audience? Meghan looked out at the crowd with something like disdain. You think I care about the audience right now? You think I care about anything except getting out of this studio and away from you? That hurt. You could see it on the faces of the audience members. They had come here to have a good time, to see a show, to laugh, and instead, they were being told that they didn't matter. Jimmy stepped out from behind his desk. It was an unusual move. Meghan, I understand that you're upset, but these people in the audience, they're not your enemies. They came here because they wanted to see you, and they don't deserve to be dismissed like that. Meghan turned to face him directly. They were standing just a few feet apart now. Don't you dare lecture me about how to treat people. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to be in my position. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to be a decent human being, and right now, you're not being one. The words hit like a thunderbolt. The audience collectively sucked in a breath. No one had ever heard Jimmy Kimmel say something like that to a guest. But he had reached his limit. His patience, which had been tested and stretched and pushed to the breaking point, had finally snapped. Meghan's face went red. How dare you? How dare you speak to me like that? I dare because someone needs to. You've spent this entire interview attacking me, attacking my crew, attacking my audience. And for what? Because I asked you a question you didn't like? Because you decided to take offense at something that was never meant to be offensive? You don't get to decide. What's offensive to me? No, I don't. But I do get to decide how I respond when someone is being unreasonable, and you're being unreasonable. I am not being unreasonable. I am standing up for myself, something I should have done a long time ago. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and being combative for no reason. You came in here looking for a fight. You were ready to be offended before I even opened my mouth. That's not true, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it sure seems like it. You walked onto this stage with a chip on your shoulder, and you were just waiting for someone to knock it off so you could play the victim. Meghan took a step closer to him. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Take that back. I won't, because it's the truth. And I think deep down, you know it. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The tension in the room was unbearable. The audience was barely breathing. Then Meghan spoke again, her voice shaking with anger. You are going to regret this, Jimmy. You are going to regret every word you've said to me tonight. I don't think I will, because everything I've said has been true. And sometimes, the truth hurts. Meghan laughed again, that same bitter, mirthless laugh from before. The truth? You want to talk about the truth? The truth is that you're a bully. The truth is that you've humiliated me on national television. Jimmy shook his head. No. The truth is that you came here expecting to be treated like royalty, and when you were treated like a normal guest, you couldn't handle it. The truth is that you've been surrounded by yes men for so long that you've forgotten how to have a real conversation. I see enemies because they're everywhere. You just proved that. I'm not your enemy, Meghan. I never was. But I'm also not going to be your punching bag. There was a commotion off to the side of the stage. Security personnel were starting to gather near the Braden exits. Everyone could feel that this was reaching a point of no return. Meghan noticed the security team. Oh, perfect. Are you going to have me removed now? Is that what this is? No one is going to drag you anywhere, Jimmy said. But I think it might be best for everyone if we ended this interview here. Fine. I was leaving anyway. She grabbed her purse from the couch and started to walk toward the exit. But then she stopped and turned back to face Jimmy one more time. I want you to know something. What you did tonight, what you said to me, it's going to follow you. People are going to see who you really are. Jimmy stood his ground. I'm okay with that. Because the real Jimmy Kimmel is exactly who you've seen tonight. Someone who tried, again and again, to be kind and fair, and who finally had to draw a line when that kindness was thrown back in his face. You call what you did kind? You called me unreasonable. You said I wasn't being a decent human being. After you spent 15 minutes attacking me unprovoked? Yeah, I think I was pretty restrained, actually. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. She started walking again, her heels clicking loudly on the stage floor. The audience watched in silence as she made her way toward the exit. But before she reached the door, Jimmy called out to her one last time, "Meghan." She stopped but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry that it went this way. I didn't want any of this." She was silent for a long moment. Then, without turning around, she said something quietly. "It doesn't matter what you wanted. It only matters what happened." And with that, she walked through the door and was gone. The studio was completely silent. Jimmy stood alone on the stage, looking at the door that had just closed behind her. The audience was frozen, unsure if they should clap or boo or do anything at all. After what felt like an eternity, Jimmy turned back to his desk. He walked slowly, like someone who had just run a marathon. When he reached his chair, he sat down heavily and looked at the camera. Well, folks, that was something. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. Jimmy took a deep breath. "I want to apologize to all of you for what you just witnessed. That is not the show we wanted to do tonight. That is not the interview we had planned." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been doing this job for a very long time, but I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like that." He looked out at the audience, and his expression softened. "I also want to say, because I think it's important, that I meant what I said. I tried to be fair. I tried to be kind. I tried, multiple times, to de-escalate the situation. But there comes a point where you have to stand up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable." The audience started to clap. It was tentative at first, but it grew. People were standing up, applauding, showing their support for the man who had tried his best to navigate an impossible situation. Jimmy held up his hand to quiet them. "I'm not looking for validation. I don't know if I handled everything perfectly, but I do know that my intentions were good from start to finish, and I hope that counts for something." He turned to his bandleader. "Cleto, can you play us something happy? I think we all need it." The band launched into an upbeat tune, and the tension in the room began to dissolve. The audience started to relax. People were smiling again, talking to each other, processing what they had just seen. Jimmy sat back in his chair and let the music wash over him. He looked tired. He looked drained. But he also looked like a man who had stayed true to himself, even when it was hard. The interview was over. The guest was gone. But the memory of what had happened on that stage would linger for a long, long time. In the control room, the producers were already reviewing the footage. They knew they had something extraordinary on their hands. Out in the parking lot, a black SUV was pulling away from the studio. In the back seat, Meghan Markle sat alone, staring out the window at the Los Angeles night. No one would ever know exactly what she was thinking in that moment, whether she felt vindicated or regretful. But one thing was certain, the conversation that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had become something much bigger. Back in the studio, Jimmy Kimmel finished his show. He did another segment, told some jokes, introduced another guest. He was a professional, and the show had to go on. But when the cameras finally stopped rolling and the audience filed out and the lights dimmed, he sat alone at his desk for a long time, just thinking. He thought about the interview. He thought about the things that had been said. He thought about how quickly a normal conversation could turn into something explosive. But it was the life he had chosen. And despite everything that had happened tonight, he knew he would be back at that desk tomorrow, ready to do it all again. Because that was who he was, a man who loved making people laugh. A man who loved having conversations. A man who still believed in the power of connection and communication. The stage was dark now. The chairs were empty. But the echoes of what had happened here would resonate far beyond these walls. This was the night that changed everything. The night that nobody would forget. The night when a simple question led to 37 seconds of silence, followed by an explosion that rocked the entertainment world. And through it all, one man stood firm. One man held his ground. One man refused to be a villain in someone else's story. That man was Jimmy Kimmel, and this was his show. The lights went out, the building fell silent, and somewhere in the Los Angeles night, two people went their separate ways, each carrying the weight of words that could never be taken back. The interview was over. But the story was just beginning. In living rooms across America, people were already talking. On social media, the clips were already spreading. In newsrooms, the stories were already being written. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. Everyone thought they knew exactly what had happened and who was to blame. But the people who were actually there, the audience members who had sat in those seats and witnessed it all firsthand, they knew the truth. They had seen a man try his best to be fair. They had seen him apologize again and again. They had seen him offer olive branch after olive branch, only to have each one thrown back in his face. And they had seen him, finally, stand up for himself, not with cruelty, not with malice, but with a quiet dignity that spoke louder than any shouting match ever could. That was the real story. That was what mattered. The real story was about a man who refused to be broken, who refused to compromise his integrity, who refused to let someone else's pain become an excuse for bad behavior. And at the center of it all, still standing, still unbroken, was Jimmy Kimmel. The host who kept his cool, the professional who stayed professional, the man who showed the world what grace under fire really looks like. The stage was dark, the cameras were off, the night was quiet, but the story would live forever.